Section 9 of Psychology, the Cognitive Powers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Psychology, the Cognitive Powers by James McCosh. Book first. The Simple Cognitive or Presentative Powers, Self-Consciousness, Part 2. They make known things as exercising potency. It might be maintained that through all the senses we know bodily objects as exercising power over us. We know tastes and smells and colors and sounds as influencing us and producing a change in us. We certainly know objects as resisting our muscular energy. It is equally certain, some would represent it as more certain, that we know the will and other mental faculties as exercising power over the body and other states of the mind. Potency is thus an element in all primary cognitions. Everything we know is exercising power on us or on some other object. 1. It is clear that if we do not know power intuitively, we can never know it by any derivative or discursive process. But consciousness being our witness, we have an idea of power quite as certainly as we have of extension or of thinking. 2. While we obtain in this way our knowledge of things within and without us as exercising power, it is only by the gathered experience that we are able to determine what is the precise nature of that power, what its laws and its bounds. All that we know directly of the power of matter by the senses is very limited. We know odors and tastes and colors as producing a sensitive affection in us. What these are, and what their properties in other respects, we have to learn by a process of observation, and we discover that odors affect us only when in a state of vapor, taste only when the bodies are liquid, and that sounds and colors are made known by undulations. By the muscular sense, we know bodies simply as resisting our energy, and we have to go to physical science to determine what are the laws of energy generally. It is the same with the power exercised by any of our mental capacities. We know that there is power to produce an effect in every operation of the mind, but it is the office of psychological science to determine the rules and limits of the faculties. They make known things as having independence, that is, as existing independent of the contemplative mind. The thing does not exist merely because the mind contemplates it. The mind contemplates it because it exists. It does not begin to exist when I begin to notice it, nor does it cease to exist because we have ceased to observe it. We have all this involved in the knowledge conveyed both by the outward and inward senses. This does not imply that the thing has any absolute independence, that it is independent of God. All that is meant is that it exists independent of the mind taking notice of it. By laying down this position, we are delivered from a position taken up by many in the present day, and which lands them first in confusion and in the end in skepticism. Taking advantage of the ambiguity in the use of the phrases object and subject, they tell us that object always involves subject, and subject object, and that in fact our knowledge, if knowledge it can be called, is made up of two factors which cannot be separated. The result is that we cannot tell what any one external object is, for it is mixed up with the subject mind, which gives it a certain form and a color. On the other hand, we can scarcely ascertain what the subject mind is. It is so dependent on the objects which call it into exercise. The result of the whole is a growing feeling of doubt as to the reality of things. Even when they are acknowledged to be real, it is supposed to be impossible to determine the precise nature of the things supposed to be real. Now, this subtle metaphysical error is to be met by affirming that the things contemplated as it is, and that the subject mind is so constituted as to be able to cognize it. If asked for proof of all this, the reply is that we have the same evidence of the mind contemplating the thing as it is that we have of its contemplating the thing. It should be the business of metaphysics not to confound the subject and object, but to point out clearly the distinction between them. Section 3. Substance. We have seen that both body and mind are known by us through the senses as possessing being, independence, and potency. Whatever possesses there may be regarded as a substance. Some who have us say, fourthly, having independent existence or independent of any creature. But the difficulty is to determine what constitutes independent existence. All things are dependent on God, and seem more or less dependent on other things. Still, there is vague truth in the statement. These marks give a definite meaning to the phrase. We see that there are two substances known to us, mind and body. Hamilton says that substance may be regarded as derived from one or the other of two words, from substo, to stand under, or from subsist, to subsist of itself. Descartes defines substance as that which subsists of itself. Spinoza gave a more complex definition. By substance I understand that which is in itself and conceived by itself. That is to say, that of which the concept can be formed without needing the concept of any other thing. Locke understood substance as something that stands under. It is evident that substance, thus understood, must come in very awkwardly under a system which derives all our ideas from sensation and reflection, as it cannot be derived from either of these sources. He does not deny the existence of substance, but he represents it as something unknown and unknowable. Most of his followers contrive some way or other to get rid of this unknown thing, as being something superfluous, and of the existence of which we have no proof. In the text, substance is represented as a thing known and involved in our intuitive knowledge, both of body and mind. Body is a substance. It is so according to our definition. We know it as existing independent of our cognition of it, and as exercising power. Locke, we have seen, represented substance as an unknown support of things. Berkeley showed that there was no evidence of body having any such support. He did not deny the existence of matter, but he denied that it was a substance. We meet Berkeley not by standing up for support, a substratum unknown and unknowable, but by maintaining that we actually know body as having an abiding existence. Mind is a substance. We make this affirmation on the same ground as we maintain that body is a substance. In every act of consciousness we know it is exerting and exercising power, and is independent of our taking any observation of it. As Berkeley denied that body is a substance, so Hume denied on much the same grounds that mind is a substance. He represented it as a mere series of perceptions, with a unity given to it by the imagination. Now we meet this by showing that in every act of consciousness, we know self as existing and exercising potency of some kind. Mind and body are different substances. In this respect they are both alike, that they are substances. As such, they have the 3 points of affinity so often mentioned, and they may have many others. There may be correlations of an important kind between their various properties, but they are known to us as different. In particular, first they are known to us by different organs, the one by the senses, the other by self-consciousness. Then secondly, they are known to us as possessing very different attributes. The one is known as extended and resisting. The other is thinking, musing, resolving. These differences entitle us to regard them as different substances. Descartes separated mind and matter so entirely that the one could hold no communication with the other except, as Malebranche brought out more fully, through an interposed divine action acting as an occasional cause, proceeding on the same principle that mind and matter could not act on each other. Leibniz brought in his doctrine of pre-established harmony, according to which they act in unison not by reciprocal action, but by an order established in each, whereby, like two clocks, they correspond the one to the other. But there is no need of resorting to any such far-fetched hypothesis. We may suppose that the two act and react on each other, according to laws not yet determined. And action goes along a sensor nerve to the sensorium, and is thence transmitted to the periphery of the brain and to the cells there, where it calls forth the mental power, with which it so operates and becomes a perception of an external object. Say, a rose. The rose may, according to purely mental laws, give rise, by an association to an entirely different idea, say to a lily, and we may then compare the rose and the lily. The law of the conservation of physical force must regulate all the action, as far as the cells in the circumference of the brain. When the action becomes purely mental, as in all recollections, judgments, imaginations, moral sentiments, and volitions, there is no reason to believe that the doctrine of the conservation of energy has any direct place. Still, it is conceivable that even in purely mental acts, there may be a later physical energy, which goes out in brain action. All this may be admitted without giving any countenance to materialism. It has all along been allowed that, as man is constituted, mind and body have a very intimate connection, and this may be the way in which this connection is kept up. But we need a great many careful observations and experiments before we can determine the precise relation of physical and mental potency. Section 4. Locke's theory as to the origin of our ideas. Locke gets the materials of all our ideas from sensation and reflection. By sensation he means the same as the Greeks did, eithenses, and as we do by sense perception, and by reflection much the same as we do by self-consciousness. Upon the materials so supplied, certain faculties work, such as perception, retention, and thus fashion all our ideas. This theory will require to be criticized as we advance, and it will be shown that there are ideas such as that of moral good and evil, which cannot thus be obtained. But meantime, let it be remarked that by these two inlets we get a great many of our ideas. By the senses of bodies as external to us, as extended and resisting our energy and resisting one another, of a self-consciousness of the mind in its various states, say perceiving, remembering, imagining, judging, discerning, between good and evil, under emotion or as resolving. The word reflection might now be applied to the more special notice which the mind takes of itself and its operations. In this there is an exercise of will joining on to self-consciousness. It is a voluntary consciousness. It is mainly by this power that the science of psychology is constructed. We observe the operations of the mind as they pass, and thus are enabled to analyze, to classify, and arrange them. Section 5. Training to habits of reflection. Man is naturally inclined to look out of himself before he looks within. There is a propriety in this. The mind must have materials of thought before it thinks, but it is of importance that we be trained to bend back our attention to and notice what is passing in our minds, and thus know ourselves. We shall be led into great mistakes if we do not, from time to time, look into our inward state and search our motives. This, I admit, may be carried too far. There may be too much of self-consciousness. No, not too much, but a misdirected self-inspection. Instead of allowing the plant to grow under the air and sunshine provided for it, we may be injuring it by ever searching into its roots to find whether it is growing. Still, reflection, which always includes inspection, is one of the peculiar properties of humanity, distinguishing man from the brutes, and should be called forth in the opening years of manhood and womanhood, and continued through life. Spontaneous thought comes forth first, constituting what is called first thoughts, but reflective thought should come after to detect error, to cast off the mistakes associated with the truth and secure certainty. We should not be satisfied with things as they appear, nor with first impressions or first thoughts, nor with the opinions we have formed in the past. We must acquire and train a habit of self-examination, and make them all pass in review before us. End of section 9.